Well, good afternoon, everybody, and happy Thursday. It's been a really long time since we've had one of our compliance scorecard Thursday live streams. With all that travel our company has been doing to all the conferences, it kind of bites into our doing these fun things that we like to do with good friends like Craig and others. And so, hold on one second. I got to go turn that volume down over there. So, hey, Tim Golden, founder of Compliance Scorecard. We're here with our good friend Craig from Symbol Security. Hey, Craig, why don't you come on up and say hello? Tell us a little bit about yourself, all that fun stuff.
Sounds great. Thank you, Tim. Killer opening, by the way. I love it. Yeah, it's great to be here. So Craig Sandman, I am the founder, co-founder and CEO of Symbol Security. We're a security awareness training platform distributed to clients through our partner community, including a great deal of MSP and MSSPs and virtual CISOs who leverage our platform to help their clients obtain security awareness training, minimum standards, and essentially use our tool set to de-risk their clients and get them up to a level of cyber safety that helps the business. Of course, Tim, as you know, this becomes really important in the world of compliance. And yeah, so we've been at it for 6 years. It's been an amazing run. I'd say we were started back in the dinosaur times of Nigerian prince scams and things like that. And here we are today, all this time later, and it's amazing what's evolved and yet what is still the common threat.
I love that. I love that. There are a couple of keywords that I picked up on there, like cyber resiliency and whatnot. Like, I love the fact that, we're bringing these terms forward. We're making it sort of common knowledge or commonplace, especially around security awareness training. And as more compliance components and compliance requirements start to come downstream to the MSPs and their customers. But before we get in, I suppose I should say hello. Hello, everybody. Tim Golden, founder and CEO of Compliance Scorecard, where we help you as the MSP have the risk conversation with your clients using our compliance scorecards. I appreciate everybody giving me a little leeway here today. Traveling always gets me the sinus infection. And so I'm a little gooky and I will make sure I mute before I start hacking up a lung. But if I do kind of disappear for a second, it's because I'm getting over this cold thing and certainly don't want to, overwhelm you all. But so, yeah, we kind of have a bunch of things we want to talk about today. Thinking about like why compliance scorecard and Symbol Security, right? We are very close to releasing our API integration. My fault. I know we've been kind of doing some things on our end. We're very a little busy. Well, okay. Full transparency. I put a code freeze on. Right. We are preparing for our penetration test because compliance. We should do a penetration test. Part of our ongoing compliance. And so our team has been kind of diligently preparing for that, which is happening in 2 days. And so I put a code freeze because I probably should have. So we weren't parallel processing. And we've spent the last month really honed in on making sure that we are secure by design, secure by default, and cleaning up the things that we've found before the hackers come after us, which is what they're going to do this weekend. So my bad that it's not done. But Craig, as we kind of been talking about our story here with security awareness training and compliance, like talk a little bit about the vision as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it starts with the business. And if you look at what's happened in the span of, say, 6, 7, 10 years with the increase in cybercrime and the reaction to that has driven more and more requirements on the data holders and small businesses too. It's very difficult to keep up with everything that's required of a small business today. So when you look at some of the things that you're probably doing for MSPs that are then delivering down to their businesses. That was big company stuff years ago, right? Now, if you're a 25-person company or a 20-person company, maybe a few hundred people also, but if you're a small business, you still are accountable for these same things. And it just becomes too difficult to execute and grow a business without these individual resources that big companies have to go do things like making sure you're compliant to everything that's going to be presented to you from one of 8,500 plus regulations, or a large customer and their DDQ, or a potential investor and their due diligence requirements. It's a lot to deal with. And the vision here is providing platforms, and I think we're on the same page here, but providing platforms that value-added third parties who are experts can use to help their customers get to that certain level of acceptability and compliance and expertise, even though they don't have the resources, the customers don't have the resources themselves. So that's the vision. I do think, and I have from the beginning of Symbol Securities days, I do think that the third party, the MSSP, the virtual CISO, the trusted advisor, technology consultant is so critical in this formula, because they are the ones that are going to have scale and expertise. There's no way that a 25, 50, 100 person business is going to be able to pay experts at every single line level of their business. So that's the vision. And I guess where we come in is just making it easy as possible.
Making it easy. Yeah. I was kind of giving a lot of thought in preparation for today around security awareness training. For those of you that know, like, I started this whole journey 20 years ago at an educational company, right? And really learned what it meant to educate, right? But it was interesting because we always kind of had that requirement of teaching the staff how to be safe. You've heard me say this before, dozens and dozens of times in the past, that I was Mr. No. I was Big Bad Tim for years, because I always started, just do the thing, remove the thing, enforce the thing. And I never actually took the time to explain the why and to train on the why, right? And so obviously, educational company working together with the really smart people that know how to educate, and we started doing education security training back in 05, 06, 07, when most of these platforms like Symbol and others did not exist. I literally had to get everybody in a room, right? Because WebEx was about the only thing, or GoToMeeting back then. We didn't have cool things like StreamYard like we do now. And get everybody in a room and pull the PowerPoint up and be a fucking brown and do that. And we literally did that year after year and, month after month, kind of walking people through. But now with platforms like Symbol, you can do that work at scale, click of a button, and actually put, meaningful content out. But to circle back, like, why are we building this integration? Why is Compliance Scorecard working alongside, security training companies like Symbol? Well, there are requirements. And we're going to get into those requirements here in a little bit, whether it's CIS or HIPAA or FTC or even cyber liability insurance, right? So Craig, your thoughts about like our integration vision and kind of anything around that before we start to dive deeper into security awareness training and why it's important.
Yeah, I think the integration's fantastic, because these two things, when I say things, compliance and security awareness training, are very much brother and sister. They're tightly related. They're not distant cousins. They're tightly related. And the reason for that is, if you look at the content and the topics that we train on, they, for the most part, make up the context of the policies that you're creating for the people. It's the same stuff.
Right.
not 100% overlap, but maybe like
Pretty close.
80 or 90% overlap. A lot
Well,
of what we train on is contained in policies. And I think it's for good reason, right? Why does compliance exist? Well, it exists because some overarching bodies think that it's the right thing to do, to protect data at large. Therefore, as we're training people, obviously we're trying to teach them what's the right thing to do to protect data and to be safe. So it's naturally tied together. But in systems, it has not been. There's been GRC tools, and then there's been security awareness training tools. So why shouldn't they be connected? Well, they should. I think just, with many companies, they build a product and that's their product, and another company builds another product and that's their product. So
right.
I think when you look at it from a partner's point of view or a customer's point of view, it's the same stuff. They want to de-risk their company. They want their people to know what their company has to adhere to and why, and they want their people to carry out that mission. Well, if you just have them sign off on something, they may not understand it. If you just train them on some concepts, but they don't have the policies in place, it may not pass muster from a compliance standpoint. So you have to connect these two things.
We do.
So I think we're doing it proactively, but really it should be a best practice.
Yeah, and I love that, right? So, we're all about better together. As a compliance company, we're Switzerland. We're working together to betterment of the MSP and ultimately their customers. I've said this before, all these disjointed tools, they only stay in their swim lane and they don't swim or buddy up next to anybody else. We're trying to break that here at Compliance Scorecard. We're trying to pull that data together to prove this stuff along the way so that your MSPs are more efficient, so that the things talk to the things like they actually should, right? I am never, ever going to build training videos. I'll say that now. That might change. I don't know. But I know, having worked in an educational research company, the level of effort that goes into building those things, like, I want to stay here. So what does that mean for us at Compliance Scorecard? Well, if we make a password policy and don't have a related video on teaching the MSP and the end user how to deal with that, then we've missed the mark, right? And so partnering and, building these strategic alliances with Symbol Security, for example, here, they've got the great content, right? They have the capacity, and something I didn't ever really want to do. Like, it's just this perfect, hand in glove. You're the peanut butter to my jelly kind of thing, right? And so working symbiotic or symbiotic, right? Trying to get a little branding in there. Little branding in there. So working together is really who we're all about. And, we've recognized that it's the missing link, right? As you look at the compliance, as you look at security awareness training, as you look at all the things that are out there, being able to pull this stuff together to make it easier for MSPs, scalable for MSPs, and ultimately protecting the small business and the small business owners, right? So I love that we're doing this. I'll take all the blame that we haven't had it done yet, but we're very close. A couple UI pieces, and hopefully within the next week or 3. Hopefully my devs are listening. So like Monday, they'll be done. I'm kidding. So
hey, Tim, I want to add something too that I think is really relevant. Is it comes to us as a business, like we see it as panic when a company's going through an audit or, any type of getting the house together exercise. And that's where your customer contact can either look really good or really bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they have their act together, documents are centralized and they've got evidence, and, board or client or, regulatory or auditor, whomever asks for, hey, can you show me that you've done this, this, and this? And if you're prepared when that question comes to you, then that's a good day for you. If you're not, and ultimately you have to ask for more time, or begs further questions internally. Now it looks like you don't have your act together, when maybe you do, but you were using 6 different tools. Now you have to assemble all the data. So we would get questions sometimes like, hey, I'm using, insert HR system or payroll system name, and I can't get this thing into that thing. And, can you extract all this data for me? And, we have from the beginning made our pieces very easy to either export or API report into different systems. But we're only this small piece of it. There's the rest of, what the customer has to do. And what I like about Compliance Scorecard is not only does it do the positive of actually having, creating valuable policies, and in our case, reporting on valuable security awareness training, but it keeps the evidence nice and tightly wound together so that in an audit or in a situation, let's just say it's a sales situation, the company's about to close the biggest deal of its life, but they need, to answer some questions before that's going to happen.
Right.
The revenue generating side of the business is not going to be thrilled if you say, hey, I actually can't get this done for 6 weeks. I got to go figure out how to do all these things now. So I think that's one of the bigger wins. And sometimes when you talk about compliance and I talk about security awareness training, we don't talk about it in terms of the benefit that it gives to that administrator. We talk about it as like, hey, let's make companies safer and let's help them comply. But if you can help them on the reporting and the, having your house together side of things, I mean, that's tremendously valuable.
Yeah, I love that you think that way because, it's really interesting. Like, having going through the exercise of building all these APIs and all these connectors and realizing like, building this data lake of all this data point and disjointed tools. And it kind of boggles my mind. I mean, I'm like, what was it? 1997, 98, 99. Like we're doing EDI. Who remembers EDI, right? Electronic data interchange. It's the same kind of concept as API, right? Just a different acronym moving forward. And I'm like, it always boggles me when software developers, especially SaaS platforms, don't start to think about what is the overall picture, right? I'm in my swim lane, but there's a much bigger pool and there's multiple swim lanes in that pool, right? And so, as we built this all out, it was talking with the devs. This all has to be API driven. It has to be microservice. It has to be so that we can work together for the betterment along the way. Because you know what? That HR person is going to want to be able to do a report. And they don't want to have to go to 15 systems and take 30,000 things and try to mush it all together, right? And so that's always been our mantra. It hasn't been easy. We are quickly learning that one SaaS platform calls it an asset. Another one calls it a device. Another one calls it a system. At the end of the day, it's just a laptop. And so we've been quickly learning over this past year, building all these integrations of like, all right, we need to standardize this stuff because it's so awful. But the point about making it easier for the businesses to be able to generate the data that they need to continue to do business, to continue to get the next deal, close the big thing, get secure, get compliant, right? That's always been our mantra. So let's talk a little bit about why is security awareness training important? Is it important? I don't know. Craig, you're the expert over on SAT. And is it okay if I call it SAT, security awareness training? Does everybody know what I mean when I say SAT other than sat on my big butt? Or is that like derogatory to you in a way? I never know when I'm talking to security training companies like yourself. Is SAT like, is that derogatory or not?
Not derogatory. And if it helps you streamline communication, I'm all for it. We tend to use the space that's given to us. So if we have time and space on the page, we'll write out security awareness training. If we're condensed, we'll write SAT.
Perfect.
So it's either or. So why is it important? It's really the two things that are obvious. One is cyber risk reduction. The other is compliance. It's those two things. And those two things are becoming more and more important and valuable than in years past, for reasons of, both punitive. So on the stick side of things, the penalties and the consequences of not having your act together there are worse. And then the benefit of being cyber aware is probably one of the bigger things that people in general need to do in this day and age. I spend a lot of time talking about personal cyber safety and the things that people need to learn there. Tim, you're a IT and security expert. People in your life, I'm sure, come to you and ask you advice on things. Or
yeah. Hey, can you look at this thing on my back? Or can you fix my phone?
And what we find is that if you're dependent on a phone or an app or a tool 100% to do the work for you, like to keep you private or to keep you safe, it's not going to happen. And it's the reality. And I think the sooner you adopt to that reality, the faster you realize I need to stand up for myself. I need to know what's safe and what's not safe. And I can't rely on a device, my IT department, a system, Tim down the road who runs a technology company. I have to be able to stand on my own. So security awareness, I think, when you think about what it does, it empowers people to be safer for themselves. The concepts that you learn at work carry through to personal. It empowers people to be better employees. The company will be a better company if the core of cybersecurity awareness training staples is understood and adhered to by all. And it really is truly one of the key pillars of de-risking a business, period. And the reason I say that is not the obvious one. Like if you don't click on a phishing email, that's better for the business than if you do click on it. But if your culture is, and I say culture, not just to skip over that word, but culture is such a huge part of having proper security awareness hygiene in your business. If the culture is that if I see something suspicious, it's my job to report it and to let my superiors know. And my superiors are expecting that of me and are thankful of me for doing that. If that's your culture, you are so far ahead of companies that have that opposite culture, which is don't bother me with your stuff. Right. If you think you have a problem, like don't waste my time, call IT and do everything that I tell you to do and don't question me. The differences between those two cultures are the difference between companies that are going to be resilient and companies that are going to have a bad day someday. We don't know when that day is. So yes, security awareness training is super important. It really, when it's executed well, I put that rider in there on purpose because if it's not executed well, it's just noise. If it's executed well, then it teaches people valuable technology life lessons. It teaches the company, the personnel of the company, what's expected of them, and then what to do when they see situations that trigger some type of action. So it's incredibly important. And oh, by the way, it's required.
And oh, by the way, it's required. I love that. We're going to get into those requirements here in a few minutes. So, when you say it's executed well, I love that you think that because we have, when I was at the MSP, all right, so not compliant scorecard, when we were at the MSP, so put on my other hat, and, we evaluated a lot of platforms. And I had a very strong biased opinion on training simulations. And I say that because I worked for an educational company. Like we were literally building courses, not cyber training, but we were building language learning courses. We were building professional development courses. And I say we, the wicked smart people, I just made the platform to help them do that. And so, but I had all that experience on like how you actually build a course, how you like, in the way adult learners learn is vastly different than K-12. And you know, we evaluated a lot of things and I hated them all because I was so biased. I was like, do I want to see a little, you know, talking dog like no, like make it timely, make it relevant, like the things that you guys are doing there at Symbol Security. And so, you know, how does this play into my thoughts on why security awareness training is important? Well, I think Desiree kind of said it really well over here, right? We need to talk about this. You know, we're all IT professionals, we're all security professionals, but my mother-in-law isn't, my next door neighbor isn't, right? And so the more that we can help educate the MSP, their customers, their end users, the better everybody is going to be. As Des says, until they lose their life savings. I mean, there was that big data breach that just happened a couple of months ago, like a couple of weeks ago. And the number of DMs, Facebook message, text messages, emails, all the like the number of contacts I received with what should I do? Right? Do I freeze my credit? Do I call my bank? Do I cancel on my credit card? Like, you know, fortunately, the credit card industry has gotten really advanced on fraud stuff, so that's kind of helpful. But it just pointed right back to that training issue, that education issue, that if, you know, if Joe's Bakery is not in this every day, all they care about is making donuts. They don't care about freezing credit. They don't know about that stuff. So this is why security awareness training is important, because it's not part of their everyday life like it is for us as us IT professionals, us, you know, security awareness training people. Like we live it and breathe it and we know it. Don't ask me how to make a donut. Well, actually you can, because I did work for Dunkin's at one point. But point is, you know, people stay in their swim lanes, and the more that we can educate them around protecting their self, their business, you know, their personal data, you know, security awareness training is that one of those, you know, avenues to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So all right, we're about halfway through. We've talked about kind of why we're doing this, where we're coming from. You know, we're kind of like, I want to pivot slightly into, we've level set. We recognize training is important. We've said it a lot of times, like it's required, right? You know, and where does this governance, risk, and compliance, where does this GRC stuff start to fall into play? I know the answer, Craig. I'm going to throw you to the wolves here for a second. Where does GRC play? Where does you know, SAT fall into GRC? How's that for multiple acronyms?
Yeah, exactly what you said. Yeah, where it falls in is essentially the controls are going to require the training. And I think I threw a number out like 8,000, at least 8,000 regulations, laws, statutes call for some form of security awareness training. So it's going to be in there. And if it's not, then at some point, a current or future customer is going to give you a set of requirements before they do business with you that is going to require it. So it is table stakes, both from a GRC perspective and from, you know, just a component of doing business at this point.
So you said, oh, third-party risk, like third-party vendors, downstream, upstream. We're all talking about that right now as CMMC is about to hit really big, right? We won't go down the CMMC route. But yes, you know, Almost every framework that I can think of, I hate to use absolutes because that's not who we are, but I'm going to do it anyways. Almost every framework that we've dealt with has some sort of requirement around some kind of training, some kind of education, some kind of phishing, some kind of thing. And I'll just present this real quick because, as MSPs, we talk a lot about CIS, for example, right? CIS has an entire control.14, talking about security awareness training, having individual components around building a program, social engineering, best practices. I pulled this from the CIS Control Explorers Guide. I can drop that link in chat after, but I just kind of wanted to have it a little bit here easier in Word for you to see. But yeah, CIS, NIST, FTC, the list goes on and on and on about the actual frameworks making a requirement. The question then becomes, well, CIS, I'm not required to do that. No, you're probably not. NIST, we're not required to do that. Well, depending on what regulations you're under, maybe HIPAA. Like, it doesn't really matter whether you're required legally or not. It's always good business practice, right, to follow some kind of framework. In fact, I'll take that a step further and say, Florida recently came out with some new safe harbor stuff that if you are following a framework, you are doing your due diligence, you're working through and moving that needle, and something happens and you can prove that you've been doing that over time, you're going to fall into safe harbor. And I don't want to get into all the gory details, but the reality is following a framework is key. And most of those frameworks have some kind of requirement around security awareness training. But Craig, I'm going to throw this at you. The caveat that I've seen in a lot of them, and here, let me find the exact text. I don't have the exact text of this. The exact text of Control 14. There's a little phrase in there that drives me nuts, and it says, "at least annually." You want to talk about that a little bit?
No, we should talk about it because I think of the 8,000 plus requirements, different statutes, regulations, et cetera, that require security awareness training, I am going to say absolute. There's probably zero that cover it in the depth and the quality that you should do it. And so I think when you look at the difference between a requirement and doing a good job, those are kind of two different things. And so you want to do a good job and you want to do it for more than checking a box. So I was going through section 14 and just kind of prepping for this call. And I mean, there's ways that I could technically do these things and do a terrible job rolling out a security awareness training program. And one of those ways to do a terrible job is to only educate once a year. If you're doing this one day in January and you don't pick it up again until next January, you've done nothing to help your business. People don't learn in a once a year data dump. They learn from a good frequency of touches and different touches to stimulate their brain, to refresh their memories, to take them, to a place in a quick exercise, and then a month or two later, or in some time period later, they have to pull that back into practice in some way. So it's the reason that when we set up curriculum for our clients, our videos and our trainings are short, they're brief and to the point. They use the necessary words and no more. And they highlight in big letters and on the screen the things that we want them to capture and remember. And ideally, we don't take up too much of their time so they don't zone out. And then, a few weeks later, we're back at them with another concept. And then, there are places where a business can come in internally and layer on top of that as well. So if you're not being hit with something on a regular basis, it's just not going to stick. And, I work for big companies, and while I remember having like hazmat training in January. I couldn't tell you what was in it because it didn't come again until next January. And all I had to do was survive the training and answer questions that were rather obvious. But those don't work. And I think that's why I came back to culture at the very beginning. Security awareness training, the program, is a part of it, but in no way, shape, or form should you expect to hit a go button on software and all of a sudden your company transforms. That doesn't happen.
Does not happen.
So you have to roll up the sleeves and be involved. Yes, you need a great platform like ours, but you have to roll up the sleeves and be engaged and involved, or else it's not going to work, and definitely not going to work if you do it once a year.
I love this, right? So let me share back over here. So I actually found the Control Explorer. So let me pull that back up. I don't want to say it contradicts itself, but it's like update regularly or at least annually or when significant changes happen, right? And so define significant change, right? Does that mean like we hired somebody, or we fired 10,000 people, or we hired, like, we had a riff? Like, I love that. It's just, I don't know. I love CIS, but I'm like, it feels a little contradictory. Like, do it at least annually or when something changes.
Well, Tim, right? That's why as a weatherman, you put 20% chance of rain every day. You can't be wrong.
Can't ever be wrong. However, there are way more controls and way more safeguards that digs deeper into like role-based, right? Talking about training the workforce. Am I still sharing? Yeah, let me go put that back up here, right? So let's see this one. Training the workforce to recognize social engineering, authentication best practices, right? This is that whole 2FA, right? MFA, passwordless stuff, right? So there are a lot of really good safeguards. And if you just look, was there 8, 9 of them? If you did one of these a month, now you've got 9 months worth of training, right? That's it. Just one of these safeguards a month. You've almost fleshed out an entire year. You can't roll this entire section, these 9 things, let me make it a little smaller, into a one-day session. Maybe you could, but I don't know anybody would want to sit. It would be a long day. It would be a long day, right? And we used to do it that way. I would do these once every 3 or 4 months manually with a PowerPoint. And I was like, no more. There's platforms like Symbol that can do that for us. And so when we talk about requirements, kind of Des popped this up here about, framework. I love the, want to buy a house with no windows or doors, right? You know me well enough to know relatability is all about kind of who we are and what we are. And so I love that analogy of like, would you buy a car without seat belts or automatic headlights or a backup camera? Well, you might think those are convenience features. They're actually safety features. Seat belts, backups, door alarms. Like, you can't get in your car without the seatbelt alarm barking in your face, right? So similar kind of concept with using a framework gives you that guidance, gives you that guardrails, whether they're required or not, right? We hear a lot of this, like, doesn't apply to me. I don't deal with X, Y, and Z. However, you probably deal with insurance. And if you look at what cyber liability insurance over the last 6 months to 3 or 4 years, all right, I'm going to use the word guaranteed every one of them. I'm probably going to get shot in the foot, and our friend, over at Fifth Wall and Data Stream will probably yell at me. But every one of them has a training requirement, right? I'll say that. I'll just make that blanket statement. Like, cyber liability insurance, at least what we have seen working with our good partners and our friends at Fifth Wall, Data Stream, Brett, and a couple of the others, Thor, by the way, in Canada, got to plug the Canadian one that I just met last week, has some kind of security awareness training component. What's interesting is they don't ask frequency, they don't ask content, they just ask, do you do it, yes or no? I think therein lies the biggest challenge with SAT in the industry. It's a checkbox exercise, even though it's not. Right?
100%. I mean, you have to make a decision as a business. Are you doing this to check a box, or are you doing this to de-risk your company? And you should do both, right? Obviously, the box check is natural if you're doing it. So if you're doing security awareness training, you want to make sure you do it in a way that does check the box, so you don't have to spend all this time and not be able to check the box. But really, the reasons why you want to do it are the reasons why we spoke about previously. And it's about culture. It's about de-risking. It's about making your business stronger and better, and helping your people out too. 100%. I mean, there's just, there are things that we can trigger in our platform related to new users, right? So, when a new user comes into the business in our platform, things can happen automatically for them. They're given the baseline, maybe a few starter topics on security awareness trainings, combined with a message from the business itself on incident reporting and its expectations. Then followed through with some of the things that that are a part of the annual curriculum. So yeah, it has to be a bit more than just the box check, or it's not going to be successful.
Well, and I think that's, the reality of compliance nowadays. For the feds, we've talked about CONMON, or continuous monitoring, or continuous compliance monitoring, right? And so, the MSPs and the SMBs have had this mentality of like, check, done, check, done. But that is all changing, right? The ability to continuous monitoring these things, continuous, training of these things, excuse me. And so, while security awareness training can feel like a checkbox exercise at the end user level, the ability to learn and protect yourself, the next time one of these big data leaks come out, Tim and Craig aren't getting a million text messages on what to do, because you may have taken a course that talks about freezing your credit and the why and the how and the things around that.
Yeah, Tim, I will tell you too, there's like a middle ground here, because I think sometimes you end up in two camps with security awareness training. Either camp one is, it never works ever, and camp two is it's necessary and everybody needs to, know everything that's communicated through the program. The middle ground is sort of a little bit more reality, which is when the program's executed well, it's communicated regularly, even if your people aren't hanging on to every word in that training program, they know it's out there. They know that it's important because they have to do it. And with some level of their attention span, they're capturing some bits. So better than not having it, or better than failure in the middle there of maybe people that aren't at the top of our gamified leaderboard, are people that are still having a more positive impact than if we didn't run training at all, or if the business didn't run training at all. And time again, leaders of companies that are using our platform will say, Craig, this is working. And I know it's working because we get more questions, we get more inbound, we get more communication from our people, and they don't care if, at the depth of how, is it 100, is it a 90%, is it 80%? They know there's a lift happening in their business and they can see it and it's tangible. And from that perspective, I think, sometimes for people that are really worried about, individuals that aren't totally locked in on the training, or, I only had 87% of my people complete training. Oh my God, 13%, what happened to them? holistically, the program existing and being well run and being consistently communicated, and onboarding new users and having them be impacted right away. And then, just making sure that interspersed in there is executive touches and reiteration of the importance of policies and principles and training. It's going to work. There are degrees of the amount of success you're going to have, but programmatically, the lift is happening. I think it's really important.
I was going to say, as the IT person in a company, blah blah blah, and training goes out, and every once in a while, I either get an email or I would get somebody knock on my door and be like, "Oh my gosh, like I took that training on XYZ, and then XYZ happened, and I knew what to do." We don't get that very often, but maybe once or twice a year, I would get that little kudo, and I'd be like, "Now, is it every user in the entire across the entities? No, but sometimes we do get that, like, oh my God, I watched this thing, I learned that thing, and next time I didn't do it." And then you have people like me that click phishing links all the time because I want to test stuff. No, I'm kidding. It's funny because sandbox accounts and whatnot. I'm like, ooh, I see. I just got a phishing link. Let's go open that up in the sandbox and see what happens. And then I get dinged because I clicked a phishing link, and I'm like, oh,
you did.
Better not do that because, but it does happen. So let's kind of regroup, kind of pull this all back together, right? So security awareness training is important all the way through the chain, not just because it's required, whether it's a GRC requirement, a regulation requirement, or an insurance requirement, but it's good business practice, right? It's the ability to be able to protect yourself, protect the business, and protect, the entire supply chain, right? We talked a little bit about specifics, CIS, and I could pull up any framework and kind of show you the same thing across multiple frameworks. We talked a little bit about frequency, monthly, weekly, annually. I'm a big proponent of, at least I think, in the 20 years of being in the educational space, is that I think adults learn better, little snippets over time, right? I'm not a researcher like way smarter people, but so what does that mean? A 7 to 5 minute thing once a month. Is it annoying? Does it take away from your day as an employee? Let me tell you. First, I'm going to get my soapbox here. All right. So if you're a small business owner and you're working with an MSP, and an MSP has been talking to you about doing ongoing security awareness training, and you have been hesitant, that 7 to 10 minutes a month, call it 15, just call it 15 minutes a month. It's probably not even that per user, can educate that group of individuals and help them, I don't know, not wire transfer hundreds of thousands of dollars because they got some fake phishing email and they were able to spot that. Not doing a thing that could put your entire organization at risk, clicking a link, opening a bad attachment, whatever. If you're a small business owner and you're not already training your staff, shame on you, right? Because I guarantee you're training your staff on how to make the donut, how to make the widget, how to clean the table, how to bus a table, whatever your business is, you're already training them to do their job. This is just another component of that job for you and the entire organization. And if 15 minutes a month can save you potentially, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of something potentially happening down the road, don't you think that's worth it? The second thing that I will say is pay them to do that work. Allot that 15 minutes of their schedule once a month and let them do that, right? Give them that moment. And here's the last and final piece that I'm going to say. which is reward them. Do not make it punitive. In fact, embrace the fact that they're doing it. Maybe have a leaderboard, maybe print some certificates out, and stick them on the wall behind you. We want to reward that good behavior as opposed to it being punitive. Something that we're doing here, a compliance scorecard, as people start to read and adopt policies, there's going to be some kind of reward, a certificate, maybe even confetti on the page, who knows? But making that shift from punitive into rewardful, everybody's going to win along the way. So, all right, I'm off my soapbox.
Beautiful. That was lovely.
Well, yeah, I don't know. It's just something that I'm pretty passionate about. Like, train your people.
Yeah.
Right. Craig, as we're kind of coming towards the end here in the last 10 or 15 minutes, is there anything before we get into key takeaways? Is there anything we haven't brought up yet that you might want to spend 5 or 6 minutes on? Or
yeah, I think we touched on it a little bit, but as a business, I'm going to say you have an obligation to help people with their home safety, in terms of cyber and things like that. But you really can bring a benefit to your people by helping them through that. And you're going to get your investment's going to pay you back. And the reason why I say that is because let's say, Tim, a company's working on their acceptable use policy and they have workers that work from home. They have attempted to get people, to only work from certain devices, but reality is they're hopping back and forth from personal to corporate devices. And reality is winning over what, IT would like to see. So let's just assume that is happening in some subset of companies. If you have layered on top of that a training curriculum that has helped people understand safe and not safe, protecting apps with two-factor authentication, looking out for things like, they're using VPN, when they connect from remote locations, setting up their home network with a guest network so that when Cousin Joey comes over, Cousin Joey gets the guest network and not the home network, and just little things that you're doing. You're helping out your people, but at the same time, it's coming back to you because that person is less likely to have their Instagram account hijacked and then come to you in corporate IT as an executive saying, I got a problem here because my Instagram account, which is followed by every single one of our clients, has now been hijacked and it's saying this explicit stuff and blah, blah, blah. So, I think there's the box check, there's the protect our company, and then there's the goodness that maybe you can't measure, but that's created by just investing in cybersecurity education of your people. Forget about the business for a moment, but your people and helping them to become safer and helping helping them in their personal lives in that way. It comes back to pay dividends for the company.
I mean, I love that. But think of it this way, like, I don't know, I'm going to make a hypothetical. We have a company policy that says wire fraud and XYZ, and we strongly urge all of our staff to freeze their credit, to go to the Equifaxes and blah, 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 and like freeze your things. Like one of the things when you're onboarded, lock your crap down. Now the end user might think, well, why are you talking to me about my personal finances? Well, you know what? Fast forward, all that data gets leaked because we put a little corporate, presentation and some training, some stuff around it. Like, you might want to consider doing this, and you did it. And now you don't have to worry about 18 billion records getting lost because you're already protected. right? You shifted that left of boom. You were prepared ahead of time, right? So, as you said, getting that in the hands, getting end users, you know, building that awareness, helping them along the way, I think it's good for society at large.
It is, Tim.
Right?
And there's one thing I would add, like there's very few companies that are like, so my brother-in-law was in the Air Force, and he had a ceremony one day, and we went in there to see him, and he's like, "Hey, come into my facility." Well, I had to give up my cell phone, and so did my wife, and his personal stuff, including his laptop, was at in a secure locker area. He worked from a secure terminal. And then when he left, he didn't do any more work. That's not how the rest of the world operates, though. I think unless you're in that kind of environment,
we walk around with these in our hands all day.
Exactly. Which one's the burner one, Tim?
The other one over there. I've got four, actually.
But if you're not in that kind of environment, then you're always crossing those lines of personal and corporate. And so you need to have the wherewithal to understand when you're taking a risk, how to stop a risk, and what are my best practices.
So I'm just going to bring this last question up here real quick. We'll spend a minute or so on this, and we'll go with key takeaways, right? They're too small. They're too insignificant. Follow naturally once they understand it. We hear this, Edwin, all the time. We're too small. They won't come after us. There's enough data in research right now. I'm not going to quote numbers because you can Google just as well as I can to prove that you're not too small. In fact, I'll leave you with one stat when people say they're too small, especially in the healthcare, because we hear that. We don't care about HIPAA. We're too small. They don't care. The reality is CNBC came out with a study last year, not too long ago. When I say last year, 8 or 9 months or so. And they did a study to find out what records are worth on the dark web. Craig, do you know what a credit card is worth on the dark web, or a social security number?
Not much.
It's probably pennies on the dollar, right?
Not much.
According to CNBC and the study that they did, what a medical record is worth?
A lot more.
60 to 80 bucks per record. So when we hear we're too small, and you are a medical facility or processing or a covered entity, and you have that data, of course they're going to come after you first because you are too small. You don't have the things in place. You live in that mentality of they're never going to get us. But the reality is your data is worth millions to them. Do the math. 60 bucks a record. You have thousands of records. Do the math.
Tim, so to add to that, like 1 and 2 person financial advisory firms, they're mega targets because of the money that they manage and the accounts that they have access to. Same with accountants. And there are professions where, they can be as small as 1 and 2 people, and they've got target on their back. But I will say too, I do some work with some nonprofits that are small and in advisory capacities and are part of them. They get hit up all the time, and it's as little as like trying to reroute 10 grand. And so just the way we scale digitally, cyber criminals scale digitally, and so they're okay with a 5 or 10K hit. Like that's a good 15 minutes for them if they can get a 10 grand rerouting of an ACH or wire done. And so it's amazing how efficient cybercrime has become. And the final piece is going back to the beginning. For so many of these organizations, it is required for them to do it anyways. And then, money managers, I mentioned, they have, fulfillment arms that are pushing down the requirements that are 10 pages long, including security awareness training. So yeah, SMBs, they may think they're too small, but they're probably also required, and they're definitely not too small.
So in our last 30 seconds, I'll give you 30, give me 30. One key takeaway. Ready, set, and go.
Key takeaway, guys, is do it for your people. Awareness training is something that, even though it is required, even though you can check a box, do it for your people. And if you're an MSSP out there, trust me, nobody internally wants to do this themselves. They want a professional that can run this for them, in addition to a number of other things. So if you're not proposing it with every bundle, please do. And if you're a customer and you're a business out there and you don't have it, it's definitely something that you at least want to put on the line item for next year.
Awesome. And then my key takeaway, even though we're already a minute over, train your people, folks. Train them in security, train them in technology, and end users, be receptive of that, right? Be aware of that. Be a participant and an active player in your training, because a more educated human can eventually lead to a better, safer environment. So thank you, everybody. We'll be back again here. I don't know, hopefully next Thursday. We've got more traveling coming up. Craig, thank you so much for joining us. We'll probably do some more of these, right? I think this is a very important topic, especially once we get the integration done. Any last words before I kick us on out?
I hope you feel better, Tim.
Yeah, thanks. I'm getting there. All right. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you on Team Tim on Friday at 2:00. Have a great week.